The well-known William Bradley Pitt needs no introduction. He is a rare kind of actor. Despite many box office failures, he has always found his way back to the top. But how did he conquer Hollywood without having any connections, unlike other talents? How did he prove he is a serious, versatile actor, not just some pretty face? And why didn't the numerous flops he has made sink him after all? Half of them would be enough to sink any career, but not Brad's. What is his superpower? Welcome to Hollywood Lore, and let's explore Brad Pitt's exciting journey. Pursuing his dream to be an actor, Brad Pitt dropped out of university and moved to Los Angeles. According to him, he had not just $10 in his pocket like Sylvester Stallone, but a full $350. So, arriving in Los Angeles, he was a real oligarch compared to many others. Despite this unbelievable fortune, Brad worked as a chicken mascot advertising various diners and also did delivery jobs, bringing pizza or Chinese food. He started with tiny roles in different films where his name didn't even appear in the credits. Fun fact, Pitt at the start of his Hollywood journey wanted to be like Mickey Rourke. Everyone in the 80s considered Rourke a big talent. But, as we now know, when Rourke found out about it, he unexpectedly decided to show everyone his boxing talent and ended up no longer being a big star. Soon, Pitt will also have the chance to make a name for himself in the boxing world, but more on that later. Gradually, Pitt moved on to TV shows, where his name even would sometimes appear. At the time, he was very excited because he had made it to the timeless masterpiece, the Pringles commercial. Pitt's first feature-length significant role was shelved in a dark corner, only to be retrieved 8 years later. The movie was The Dark Side of the Sun, and in this one, Brad played a guy who was allergic to the sunshine. The film was a joint production of Yugoslavia and the USA in the late 80s. Yugoslavia was going through hard times, so the movie couldn't be finished. It was released on video only in 1997, when the producers suddenly realized Pitt had become a big star and they could earn some extra cash. While The Dark Side of the Sun was gathering dust, Pitt took part mostly in horror films. He was afraid of ending up on TV, so he agreed to the most insignificant roles, where Brad was usually killed in some freaky way. At least he was noticeable. By the way, at that time, Brad Pitt could have ended very brutally, like in these horror movies. Pitt met Robin Givens and became big friends with her, while Robin was in the legal process of ending her friendship with another guy, Mike Tyson. Mike once caught Givens in a car with Brad near her house. Pitt was saved only by his ability to smile sincerely and pretend to be a huge fan of Tyson. Mike let his huge fan leave peacefully and didn't see him ever again. Brad's boxing career crashed before even starting. But his film career was about to take off. For every success in the early years, there were at least 2 failures. According to Pitt, his first significant accomplishment was Thelma Louise. At first, it was a Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep film. Then it became a Jodie Foster's and Michelle Pfeiffer's, and finally, it became Sir Ridley Scott's. He brought Pitt into the movie, but he didn't make it simple for Pitt. William Baldwin was the first in the line, but his career was taking off, and after receiving a more interesting offer, he decided that his brothers would make fun of him for such a small role and ran away. Then, Robert Downey Jr. was cast, but Ridley Scott said Robert looked like a tiny chihuahua next to tall Gina Davis, so he was fired for being too short. Scott then considered George Clooney, but ultimately rejected him, saying he would look ridiculous in a cowboy hat. The movie was in development for 2 years already, so Scott had to choose quickly between 2 remaining options, Christian Slater and Brad Pitt. The cowboy hat suited Pitt better. Thelma and Louise performed well at the box office, and Brad's supporting role earned him his share of fame. It was this movie which discovered Brad Pitt as a rising sex symbol. Soon another sex symbol will come to Pitt's rescue when he goes under. Right after Thelma and Louise, Pitt signed up for Cool World, which had a serious $30 million budget, but crashed at the box office. Critics demolished the movie. Kim Basinger, who had the leading female role, even earned a nomination for Razzie Award. The show's failure and poor ratings, with average score of 4 out of 10, are often blamed on a sudden change of concept. It was supposed to be Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but for adults. The plot was altered to target teens after Kim Basinger joined. The result was a chaotic mess. Released alongside Universal Soldier, Pitt's film had no chance against The Belgian Dancer and flopped, earning only $14 million. Another film, The Favor, later also failed at the box office, but Pitt was spared because he had a supporting role. Brad was saved by Robert Redford, who was often called the older and sexier version of Pitt. Redford was directing A River Runs Through It and saw himself in Pitt in Thelma and Louise. He immediately decided to cast Pitt, but he managed to screw up the first audition. Brad didn't give up, though. He recorded a second audition on tape and sent it to Redford. That convinced him to cast Pitt over River Phoenix. Many years later, Pitt will regret crossing young Indiana Jones. The film made $66 million with a budget of 12 and received several Oscar and Golden Globe nominations. Brad got none of that, but the movie solidified his rising star status. For his next film, California, he earned $800,000. The director Dominic Sena wanted Pitt after seeing him in Thelma Louise. The movie didn't do well at the box office, same as True Romance, where Pitt had a minor role. But True Romance was worshipped by audiences and by critics so much that California's flop didn't bother Pitt at all. Moreover, shortly he had the first significant hit where he began to show signs of his unforgiving nature. Interview with a Vampire is famous for Pitt's legendary suffering on set. Brad constantly complained about being hung upside down to get blood to his head and having to wear contact lenses, to which his eyes were allergic. He also complained about London, having to spend 6 months in a city that was darker than the film itself. A week into shooting, Pitt approached the producer with the intention of leaving the cast. It was explained to him that the book was a huge hit and that the film had a blockbuster budget of $60 million, which would launch his career into space. Oh, and that he would owe to the studio his body if he decided to break the contract. Back in the day, it was $40 million. Taking only inflation into account, this penalty would be worth $80 million today. Pitt simply didn't have the money. But his drama didn't end there. He had a problem with Tom Cruise. It was here that rumors began to circulate about Brad Pitt's little notebook, in which he wrote down the names of naughty actors he never wanted to work with again, no matter what. The conflict is not a gossip, but why it happened is unclear. According to one version, Pitt didn't want to use a deodorant on set, and that made Tom Cruise salty. Brad's time on the screen immediately decreased. The second version is about Tom Cruise's desire to help Pitt's acting and giving him his super talented tips. Pitt didn't want to hear any of that, so his screen time shrinked even more. At that time, Cruise was already a savage, while Pitt was just some average Joe, so Cruise's influence on the filming was no joke. However, Pitt got his sweet revenge by putting Cruise in his notebook. Despite his suffering on set, it didn't affect the final quality. In fact, Pitt's miserable look added charm to his character, which was unplanned. Interview with the Vampire earned $224 million at the box office and catapulted Pitt's career to space, even though Cruise double-checked to remove his face from movies' posters. Legends of the Fall was released 6 months after the Interview with the Vampire. For this one, Brad signed before Interview's success, so it was still a kind of movie which featured a regular, ordinary guy, Brad Pitt. At first, the leading roles were supposed to be given to Tom Cruise and Sean Connery. Johnny Depp could also be in the movie, but unfortunately, it had Tim Burton deficiency, so Depp took off. With a budget of $30 million, it made $160. Pitt was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Dramatic Actor. According to Pitt, he then finally bought a classy residence with a pool and top-notch security, which was soon bypassed by some Ethan Hunt, who robbed his new mansion. Though he didn't steal much more than Pitt's dignity. Soon, Pitt will recover by winning his first Golden Globe Award, but not for what you would expect. In 1994, an extra zero was added to Brad's standard fee, but in 1995, he took a pay cut for 7. Despite the cut, it was still a record salary for him. Brad was so much into the movie, he had to refuse Apollo 13. According to one Hollywood legend, David Fincher had to use his big brain to get Gwyneth Paltrow for the movie. She refused at first, but then Fincher signed Pitt, hoping he would sweet-talk her into the project. His bet played, and Gwyneth finally agreed to take part. Brad Pitt still considers Seven to be the best-in-class film he ever starred in. Interestingly, Sylvester Stallone and Denzel Washington could have been in the movie. Later, they regretfully claimed that they goofed up turning it down due to its excessive violence. A big question: what would Seven become with them in the main roles? This movie would be nuts! And let's go even further. Which Pitt's role would suit Stallone the most? Write down your options in the comments, but only the wrong ones. Anyway, thanks to Pitt's and Freeman's support, Fincher got full creative control. If someone would ask for a full creative control in Sylvester Stallone's presence, he would quickly jet off to film another movie. Seven had a budget of $33 million and made $327. Pitt agreed to trim his fee from $6 to $4 million, but scored another 3 as a percentage from the film's distribution. That was fortunate, because soon he had to work for a bag of chips. Pitt wanted to distance himself from romantic roles, so he decided to take part in legendary Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys. Brad's fee was just $100,000, but Bruce Willis got even less. He was basically filming for food. When the producers told him they couldn't pay him even his petty $500,000, Bruce decided to refuse the fee whatsoever and go for a percentage of the box office earnings instead. Funny thing here, Johnny Depp was running around director Terry Gilliam trying to get into the movie, but Gilliam chose Pitt instead. After all the Pirates of the Caribbean, it seems like a perfect role for Depp with his talent of showing lunatics and clowns. But maybe the director was not ready for such a talent. Pitt, on the other hand, looked more like sugar-overdosed Tasmanian devil, which gave a mind-boggling contrast to his previous dramatic romantic image. To slightly calibrate Pitt's performance, Gilliam decided to forbid his smoking on set. That did the trick. Brad won a Golden Globe and got an Oscar nomination. The movie had some issues, though. 12 Monkeys got destroyed during test screenings, but the producers and the director convinced the studio not to cut it. They said all the complaints were about the film's non-linearity and eccentricity, which would play into their hands in the long run. It was literally scorched earth at the studio, but the team managed to convince the bosses. 12 Monkeys earned $169 million on a $29 million budget, securing Brad's image as a capable actor. For his next film, Sleepers, he starred with Kevin Bacon, Robert De Niro, and Dustin Hoffman. No longer inferior to such gigachads, he charged $10 million. The film did well at the box office, but starting from there, it seems like Pitt got greedy and stopped reading scripts. In 1997, he had two expensive films, The Devil's Own and 7 Years in Tibet. While 7 Years in Tibet got bad critical reviews but good audience scores, The Devil's Own failed in both. The films flopped at the box office, and Brad received a lifetime ban from visiting China for 7 years in Tibet. More than that, he got an award for the third worst accent in Hollywood history, according to Empire Journal. Pitt sucks at accents, but soon it will help him with one of his best comedic roles. Leave a like if you also like Dags. The Devil's Own is also known because it featured another member of Brad Pitt's list. Pitt claims he signed up for a project expecting fun. His character would cheerfully bash the hell out of a bunch of people in a junkie house to some Irish music. But at some point, Brad recommended Harrison Ford for a support role. The rest is history. By the end of filming, the plot was nothing like the original. Brad was furious. Ford later said Pitt was too young and forgetful on set, requiring deep dive on how to speak to adults. Rumors suggest Brad Pitt was even roughed up during filming, but both actors deny any physical violence. The constant changes and reshoots ballooned the budget to $90 million, and after test screenings, over 40 minutes were cut out. The film only earned $141 million in the box office, with Ford earning $20 million and Pitt $12 million. 7 Years in Tibet also flopped, grossing $131 million on a budget of $70. Instead, Pitt could have starred in Tony Scott's Fan, but he wanted Robert De Niro's role. The Fan also flopped. For Meet Joe Black, Pitt got a record fee which became a standard for him, $17.5 million. He pushed Anthony Hopkins into the cast, later regretting it as Hopkins often clashed with the director, refusing to make multiple takes of each scene. Well, at least he didn't eat anyone. The film's failure is attributed to its crazy long 3-hour runtime, which wasn't cut despite test audience feedback. The movie was released as it was, and now it's considered a mistake. The TV version runs only 2 hours, but director Martin Brest disowned it. He even demanded the studio to remove his name from the credits and replacing it with the famous pseudonym Alan Smithee, which is used in Hollywood by directors to disown the movie. The film still managed to make some money, mainly because of the trailer for the first episode of Star Wars, which was shown before the movie. So Star Wars fans probably bought up all the tickets in the first week. Anyhow, after 5 successes, it was already the third flop in a row for Pitt, and the fourth was coming. In Fight Club, Brad was lured by David Fincher. Pitt jokingly calls Fincher the biggest pain in the ass when it comes to this movie. The actor said that although almost all of the bed scene between him and Helena Bonham Carter was done with computer graphics, it didn't save them any trouble. Pitt and Carter spent over 3 days in the studio recording various moans. Director David Fincher couldn't get enough of it. It's unclear which variants of the moans the director chose for the film and which were stored in his personal collection. But here's one example of Fincher's sadistic determination. One of the stuntmen was tossed around the stairs all day long. In the end, the movie included the very first take, which turned out to be the best one. Despite being considered a cult classic now, Fight Club was a box office failure, grossing only $101 million on a $63 million budget. However, this failure has a well-known nuance. Fight Club became one of Fox's best-selling DVD releases in the studio's entire history, suggesting it eventually turned a profit. The failure of Fight Club marked a turning point for Pitt. He stopped looking for films with the highest paychecks and immediately agreed to star in Guy Ritchie's Snatch for a few bucks. Pitt was a huge fan of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, so he begged Guy Ritchie to cast him for the second part. Brad wanted Jason Statham's role, but when he showed his British accent, he was asked not to do that ever again, so they decided to make him a gypsy. Pitt was so hyped about the film, he wasn't even stopped by the fact that he had to play the fighter again right after Fight Club. Snatch cost $10 million and grossed $84 million. Pitt's next film, The Mexican, also made him cut his fee to $5 million. He was supposed to star in The Bourne Identity, but the project moved slowly. When Tony Scott offered him a role in Spy Game with Robert Redford, he dropped Bourne, leaving producers to cast Matt Damon. And since 2 successes in a row was enough for Pitt, The Spy Game grossed just $143 million with a budget of $115 million, while Bourne became a grand franchise. Brad's failure with Spy Game was covered by Ocean's 11's success. At first, Pitt didn't want to participate, but he was convinced by his friend George Clooney. Pitt agreed to cut his fee, but demanded the highest percentage of profits among other actors, earning around $30 million. Brad's next major project was Troy. He could have starred in Oliver Stone's Alexander, but quickly vanished when heard about the film's specifics. Troy performed decently, but is considered a failure due to its huge $175 million budget. Pitt hid this flop with Ocean's 12 and Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This movie had a huge impact on the actor's career and personal life. Nicole Kidman was originally cast as Mrs. Smith, but she had to drop out, and after that, Brad ran away. However, when the producers signed Angelina Jolie, Pitt quickly rejoined the cast, eager for the opportunity to work with her. You know the result. Brangelina appeared. The movie was problematic and suffered in post-production. Usually nothing good awaits such a project, but not this time. It made $487 million on a $110 million budget. That wasn't disappointing, but another thing was. Most of Pitt and Jolie's bedroom scenes were cut to get a teen rating, as the scenes were too mature. Brad decided to do some real and very serious movies. The first serious movie was Babel, for which he was paid just $1 million. It grossed $135 million on a budget of $25 million. Since then, Pitt has also started producing films. As a producer, his first big success was The Departed in 2006. Brad was offered Matt Damon's role, but he felt being too old for it, and chose to pursue Babel instead. Brad's next production, the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, drowned despite Pitt's miserable $1 million fee. The movie earned just $15 million on a budget of $30 million. Pitt said they knew the film was not for masses, so actually expected this flop. The assassination of Jesse James marked the beginning of 4 consecutive box office successes for Pitt, solidifying his status as a superstar. One of these is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And at first, Button was meant to be portrayed by Tom Cruise. Steven Spielberg wanted to direct it, but the project drowned in production hell. Then Fincher appeared, brought Pitt into the movie, and revived it. The success spree ended with Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. The film was expected to be a commercial failure, but was well received by critics. Around this time, Angelina Jolie wanted to become serious as well and direct something. She envisioned Brad as the guardian of the African continent from poachers in an action-packed project. According to Jolie, the main character was a real Chad, and no other actor except for Pitt would be able to play such a Mufasa. But the movie didn't happen due to Pitt's busy schedule. Back then, everyone thought Angelina would punish Pitt for such a trick, but it seems Jolie forgave him. Pitt shifted more towards producing. He appeared mostly in his company's films, such as Killing Them Softly and Moneyball. These had modest success, but another one, 12 Years a Slave, became a box office hit and won a pack of Oscars. Brad's career took a downturn after World War Z, Fury, and The Big Short. These films still were hits, but then By the Sea, directed by Angelina Jolie, happened. In this one, Pitt was forced to participate for obvious reasons. By the Sea flopped, and Brangelina divorced shortly afterwards. The trial revealed Pitt's alcoholism, and his career was flooded with flops like Allied, Ad Astra, and low streaming numbers for War Machine. The only bright spot was a small role of an invisible man in Deadpool 2, but many didn't know it was Pitt who got electrified there, to be honest. One could assume Brad Pitt was over. The next step would be to completely move to conquer streaming services and B-tier movies. But Brad was saved by Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tarantino was writing this script for many years, and initially it had to become a book. The role Pitt eventually took was different at first, so back then he refused. Tarantino approached Tom Cruise, who also cringed and declined. After rewriting the script and making Pitt's character a stuntman, Tarantino returned to Brad, and this time he agreed to participate. For his role in the film, Pitt won his first acting Oscar at the age of 56, although he had won as a producer in 2014 for 12 Years a Slave. Despite the massive failure of Babylon in 2022, Pitt continues to work on new projects, including a comedy action film, Wolves, with his friend George Clooney. Despite ongoing legal battles with Angelina Jolie and accusations of aggressive behavior, Pitt remains unsinkable. His production company Plan B is doing good. So good, they actually received a huge investment and have epic plans to hijack Hollywood in the recent future. Thanks to his little notebook of naughty actors, Pitt now seems to know who to work with as a producer and who to avoid at all costs. Lately, Pitt seemed very calm, exuding a bit of a Buddha-like vibe similar to Keanu Reeves. That's especially noticeable in Bullet Train, where Pitt seems to portray a version of himself, distancing from all that toxic past and just looking for some inner peace. I hope you'll find one. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I wish you to explore more Hollywood lore